And welcome to our next session. I'm really excited to announce Faith and the language of intention, language and intention of everyone else, leaving leadership. So actually, for me, the title and the content is in a way positively disruptive. To put us outside of the box, of the non-existing box. And really just a few words about Faith, because we were both really amazed by meeting her last time. So she's got quite powerful questions like, what if we stop talking about leadership? Stop looking for leaders, stop training leaders. Like that's our job now. I say stop making up new kinds of leadership. So these are the questions that Faith uses in when she enters organizations. She mostly works with NGOs and the public sector, and she loves having an impact on their work. And she's serving, as she puts it, she's serving people who serve people. She's looking for a possibility everywhere she goes. And maybe one important thing, it's extremely early for her now in the morning in the States. So we do appreciate your presence with us. And the other thing is that you told us that you start every morning 2 hours not talking to other human beings. So this is a double grace that we are receiving today, I guess, because these first 2 hours actually Faith takes up with walking her 2 dogs in the forest and not normally like at a conference sharing. So thank you, Faith, for being with us. Thank you so much and welcome.
Thank you. As has been said, it is very early. It is a bright and sunny 6 a.m. in Olympia, Washington. I'm actually currently sitting in my mother's office, visiting family. My home is in Portland, Oregon. If anyone has been there or would ever like to come visit, just let me know. It is a great town. I'm really excited to be here with you today. One of the things that we don't always do well as human beings, right? Not even as practitioners, not even in the fields that we're in, but as human beings. And sometimes it's hard to be aware of the things that are so deeply embedded in our mindsets that we don't even know to question them, right? That's such a big part of our lives. So when I've asked these questions that were introduced to you, like, what if we stop talking about leaders? What if we stop training leaders? Some of the rooms in which I've asked those questions, people get real upset. Well, that seems, I don't know that we need to go that far. I mean, maybe we could just talk about leadership differently. And I said, well, how is that changing anything? Right. So that's kind of the gist of what I wanted to get into today. And it may be that the things that I have to say today are also alarming to you. It may be that a light bulb goes off and you say to yourself, oh, how come we aren't having more conversations about the validity of leadership as a central tenet of how we live and work and design work and spend money, elevate people, allocate power, right? These are all things that are related to the leadership sphere. So I'm going to share my screen and share a little bit of slides with you. As you know, from your experience, I'm sure it will take a second for me to get them all correct. So give me just a moment. All right. Before we get started into this, I'd actually love for everyone to put in the chat just your name, where you're from, and maybe a little bit, like maybe one sentence about your experience with leadership. And I'm going to ask maybe Annette and Dora to read some of those out for me real quick. I think one of the tenets of this thinking that I have around leaving leadership is that at this moment, I'd like to model that. At this moment, I am leading a session, but to me, your presence here is what makes this time worthwhile, right? So I'd love just a little bit of you in the room. And then Annette and Dora, would you mind reading a couple out of what folks are sharing in the chat?
Yeah. Marzia from Italy, Giovanna, Italy. I'm the co-author of Equity, Hierarchy-Free Org Design. I love the idea of leadership. Ana Belen, I'm Spanish living in Italy for the last 25 years. Renata from Italy. And there was a third question about leadership, right?
Yeah. Yeah, just if you have a little of your own experience about leadership, or if you'd like to frame it differently, what brought you to this session today?
Ana Belen, my experience about leadership is that it depends on the leader. Smiley. Okay, Svetlana from Ukraine / Italy.
Welcome,
Paula.
Svetlana.
Yeah, we have a few Ukrainian participants because Giovanna was really kind enough to reach out and offer participation to them. So we are really honored to have you here, Svetlana. Paula from Milan, I'm a natural positive leader looking for sustainable happiness for myself and my teams.
Thank you, everyone. Language and intention. Thanks, Marissa. I think happiness is what we're all looking for, right? Happiness in our work, happiness in ourselves. One would hope happiness and peace in the world as well. As we're looking at this conference particularly, and I know that there have been a lot of conversations about hierarchy. At the very center of hierarchical conversations, there is an idea about leadership, right? And we use a lot of language about leadership. But what is it? I mean, do we know? Maybe not. I'd like to just point out that when I Googled for a definition of leadership, over 4 billion entries came up. And I suppose my question is, if we know what leadership is, do we need 4 billion definitions? More than 4 billion definitions, right? And I think this is one of the things that we run into as maybe a central concern. If we're talking about something this much and we can't agree on what it means, what are the conversations that we're having, and how much meaning and shared purpose can really emerge out of this word and this idea? If we have all of those different definitions, what are we looking for? I'm sure everyone in this room, somebody said it depends on the leader. Maybe it depends on the kind of leadership we're defining, right? People are talking about things like humble leadership, right? We talk about servant leadership, transformational leadership, strengths-based leadership, disruptive leadership. This would be my favorite if I thought leadership was the way. And then one we have a lot of experience with, authoritarian leadership, right? And I suppose the question that I want to get to with you today is, why do we need the word leadership here at all? Aren't we really looking for humility? Aren't we really looking for a sense of service, for transformation in the organizations and places where we work, for strength in ourselves and in others, right? Finding that strength in ourselves and others. We're looking for disruption and innovation. And in some cases, we are looking for authority. When we look at these things side by side, for me, the list on the right, the list of humility and service and transformation, has inherently more power because it is action. And because when I see those things, It's not about someone else. It's about me, regardless of my role in an organization or a community, right? When I'm talking about humble leadership or servant leadership, I'm automatically implying that there is someone for whom these things are important, and it might not be me, right? It's the person who is the leader. And maybe that's me in an organization, and more often than not, it's not. More often than not, it's not you. So if we're looking for humility and service and transformation and disruption and all those great things, even just changing the language, even just removing the word leadership from that conversation already begins to change how we perceive our relationship to the actions and ideas that bring us closer to really changing the world. Unfortunately, I mean, part of my argument around this as well is that the training, development, and certifications and degrees for leaders, right? How many folks here have been in an executive leadership training program? If you want to just drop it in the chat. How many folks here, right, have trained leaders or been in some sort of leadership development course or leadership development conference even? The answer is lots of people. Every year, we spend $166 billion on leadership development. At least 50 billion of that is just wasted, because the research is pretty consistent in saying that the leadership programs don't really do anything. There are no significant shifts or changes in organizations who have spent the money to quote unquote develop their leaders in terms of their outcomes or functioning, right? So there's virtually no impact. Why are we spending $166 billion a year on programs and processes that have no discernible value to our organizations, and that only really focus on a very small slice and subset of the people who work in our organizations, right? So if we look at it at a tiered organization, at a hierarchical organization with 100 employees, right? How many of those folks would be considered leaders? 5? 10? And if we're spending $166 billion on those folks, how much support, how much elevation, education, and investment are we spending on the other 90% of people in our organizations? This is problematic in many ways, but particularly at this time when we're really talking about equity in the world and starting to wake up more to the fact that our organizations are inherently inequitable. Under this paradigm for the last 100 years, really, we've been speaking about leadership pretty constantly. The term and the ideas around leadership that we use in organizations today really started blossoming and taking center stage in the early 1950s, kind of after World War II. And what's that gotten us? Well, about 15% of CEOs are women. Women are 51% of the population, y'all. This is not equitable. In Fortune 500 companies, there are 5 Black CEOs. That is not 5%. That is 5 total. 8%, if we want to expand that and try to include more Black leaders, Black people who are smart and capable and educated, 8% of C-suite executives are Black. And by expanding from just CEOs to C-suite, we've more than tripled the amount of people, but our percentages are no better. 2.4% are East Asians. Again, you can just see these numbers, right? And here's what that looks like on a graph. People say we've been getting better at building equity in our organizations, but that's just patently untrue. This is a graph. This goes from 2000 to 2020. This slight uprising in the blue section that we see down below is only because those are new positions. The actual number of white male CEOs has not gone down. And I think one of the reasons that I challenge the leadership paradigm is because if this is the paradigm that we're using, and this is where we're at, then something is fundamentally not working, right? Fundamentally, this is not working. This graph should be 70% blue. If we're including women, if we're including people of color from around the world, right? This doesn't even represent entire continents of human beings whose innovative capacity is being completely untapped. We're trying to solve problems in our organizations, in our world, that we absolutely cannot do if we don't have the perspectives and the wisdom and the brilliance of other kinds of people, right? So how do we start to make these changes happen? And this is where we come to the language part in the title of this presentation. I don't know if most of you are familiar with Peter Block. He's been a little bit of a guru for me. And his thinking is a lot of the reason that I came to this thinking for myself. And he said, if I wish for transformation in the world, language is the means through which it will occur. Language. So how, I mean, and for me, yes, it's the language of leadership. My gosh, I think about these things all the time. And when I am asked to go into meetings and to talk to clients, I still say leaders. I say leading. And every time I get a little, oh, I wish I could stop doing that. It's so ingrained. And so one of the keys to kind of shifting away from these ideas of leadership is changing the language. Can I stop saying leaders? We can't just stop talking about, we need to talk about something else, right? We need to do a swap, if you will. For me, stewardship is the term that I prefer. If you want to just, in your own minds right now, take a second and think about somebody who you would identify as a leader in an organization where you work or a community where you work. And go ahead and in your brain, substitute the word steward in for that person and say, this person is a steward for my organization. This person stewards the mission of my organization. The tone and tenor and relationship that you have with that person has changed already. Words that we can use as well: stewardship, guardianship. I'll let you guys kind of look through these. I want to mind time. But all of these are words that we can use for people who help our organizations thrive and grow and help the people in our organizations thrive and grow. There's a lot of different ways that we can look at this, right? And there may be words that we haven't even really invented yet, right? That if we opened up this conversation in language, what could become possible? What could be possible if the person who assigns work for me is a culture model? And when I look at them, I get to see the model of the culture that I want to grow into, right? Unfortunately, most of the folks that we call quote unquote leaders today are really just profit protectors. Right? This set of words isn't very comfortable. That doesn't feel great for me. That doesn't represent me at all, or you, right? I want to give you a couple of minutes to try. It looks like we're a little bit short on time, so let's take 4 minutes, Dora.
Okay.
And we're going to send you out into breakout rooms, and I would like y'all to have a conversation about the people who make decisions and do those things in the organizations where you work, and not use the word leadership, leaders.
Okay,
Just
I'm opening
try
the
it.
rooms.
Yep, thank you.
So we have 4 minutes. See you all in 4
Yep,
minutes.
just 4 minutes.
4 minutes, okay.
Time goes so fast.
Yeah.
It does.
Time goes so fast. All right, well, we'll just have 4 minutes and then we'll have 5 minutes for questions when we get back.
Yeah, that's totally cool, Faith. We have a 15-minute break after your presentation. So
Okay.
we do want to kind of, end on time, but I think, 2 or 3 minutes won't hurt, I guess. So.
Yep.
How do you feel, Faith?
I'm good. I want more time.
Yeah, you're
It's
so passionate about it. So I was so sorry to write you the message that we have only 20 minutes left.
I know. I didn't even see that, but I'm looking at I have a timer. So part of it is just it's not something that people really think about. Right. And so like part of just getting the conversation to open in people's minds and say like, oh, we could use different words.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So what exactly do you do with your clients, if I may ask?
I don't talk about leadership.
Well, that's what you don't do, but why are they hiring you?
Mostly people hire me to do I do a lot of DEI work. I do like kind of community stakeholder engagement work, which is nice because that's really about everybody. I do I have a contract right now where part of the conversation is around leadership, but it's not the part that I'm having. So it's a subcontract for another firm, so I don't really have the capacity to challenge them in that way. And the organization that we're working with has a lot of psychological safety issues, so probably not the best time to really go in challenging and breaking down norms and paradigms. So I'm focusing on well-being tools and helping folks learn to build some habits around self-compassion and, kind of self-love. There's a lot of great little things that you can do, notes that you can stick on your mirror, meditations that you can work with. It's been a really trying couple of years for people.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And Faith, we have like 40 seconds left before we come back, and you will have like 5 minutes altogether. How you want to use it?
So I'm think that I'm just going to leave this slide up there and let people ask questions. That's what we're going to do.
Okay. Okay. So 15 seconds.
Yep. So it looks like we're closing.
Yeah.
Welcome back.
So, Faith.
Yeah, sorry, I talked a little too much. I get really excited about this idea, y'all. As a systems thinker, we're always looking for places of leverage, right? Places where a small action or innovation can transform systems. So I want to leave this slide up here, which just talks a little bit about why the language matters. Here's some of the ideas that get centered in leadership, and here's some of the ideas that get centered in stewardship. Look at those differences. And I want to just open up for questions from anyone for a couple of minutes. And I would say just go ahead and raise your hand, and Dora or Annette will open space for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
May I add a comment on Faith?
Yes.
Yeah.
Stewardship really resonates with me because, as you know, I tilt to self-organizing companies, so without leaders. So while leadership implies that there is somebody up here and the followers down there, because there is a difference between these two elements, the steward doesn't need to be higher or more important. You know, everyone can be a steward. So this connects a lot with my thinking. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments?
Either in the chat or if you raise your hand so we see.
I can also just keep talking for the rest of our time. So you just,
sure.
But I want to make space for you. Peter looks very thoughtful. I feel like.
Yeah, there is an interesting concept behind, I mean, leadership as single point and the rest as multiple options. So the basic element here is to change, you know, our mindset from one to many. Not only people, but also elements, way of imagine, way of doing things.
Yeah, and kinds of people, many kinds of people, right? We tend to, when selecting quote unquote leaders, to have a very actual narrow mental definition of what those people look like, of what those people act like. We tend to look for things like confidence. Well, how many people who've experienced a lifetime of racial trauma have a ton of confidence walking into a room? Right?
Yeah.
I'm still thinking about the vision and the visionary as I'm under influence of Simon Sinek, who said very recently that CEO should be a chief vision or visionary officer, which is a very appealing, compelling idea for me.
It is. However, I would ask, how much more compelling is a vision that's shared? How much more compelling is a vision that emerges from the organization through appreciative inquiry sessions that engage everyone, right? So the only thing that I would question about that, Peter, is that in that model, there is still one person who is defining for everyone else what's important. And I think that's where we run into some issues of equity, right? Where we run into issues of inclusion, where we run into, there is no such thing as building equitable systems that include when we don't also share power, right? So without power sharing, none of these actions that we talk about in our world, when we're talking about DEI initiatives, when we're talking about upraising women, when we're talking about having more inclusive and innovative systems, none of those things can happen if nobody in the system has power, except a couple people at the top. That's the power to create. It's the power to innovate.
Great point. It's a great point.